What's up guys, Doug Polk here, and we're back with another episode of Poker Hands, and today we're going to be taking a look at another hand between Viffer and Phil Ivey from Poker After Dark.
That's the straddle. Raise to 5,000.
Make sure you pay the straddle too.
Ivey makes it 5K to go. Viffer joins in. Antonius will have to pay another $3,400 to take his 6-3 offsuit into battle. That's exactly what he'll do.
Our hand begins with Patrick Antonius straddling it up to $1,600, and Phil Ivey coming in for a raise with Ace-Jack and the hijack, certainly the standard and correct play. The action then folds to David Peat in the button, who has 8-7 suited, and again we have a spot where both calling and raising can make sense, and I've seen in the comments people complaining, oh, you say you can do one thing or another, what's up with that? Well, sometimes in poker both decisions can make a lot of sense, and this is a good example of that. By 3-betting here, he can isolate Phil Ivey and look to add in some bluffs to his value range like aces, kings, ace-king, and this hand will have a lot of deception post-flop. But also by calling, he can play a suited character in position, and with some deeper stacks, this can be a great play as well. Maybe the fact that David Peat isn't as deep makes this a little more of a 3-bet, but I don't mind the flat at all. The small blind folds, the big blind folds, and it's back to Patrick Antonius, who's dealt a primero straddle hand with 6-3 off, and he decides to somehow take a flop. Look, I get it, it's your straddle, sometimes you gotta put your foot down, but I think you can let the 6-3 off go. Anyway, we are 3-handed to a flop. Let's see what it is.
Top pair, top kicker for Ivey. 8s for Viffer.
That's 10,000.
The flop comes Jack-8-4 with 2 spades and 1 diamond, giving Phil Ivey top pair, top kicker, and David Peat middle pair with a backdoor flush draw. Phil Ivey then decides to continuation bet about $10,000. I like this size. I like it with this hand. This seems like a great play. You're looking to build a pot with a good hand, so I'm in agreement with his decision here. Now to David Peat in the button, and I think he has a pretty clear call. Raising, while maybe has a little merit to try and put some hands in a tough spot, get you to some safe rivers, doesn't really do enough for you. If you do raise and get called, you're almost always going to be behind, or maybe your opponent has a strong draw. So raising doesn't accomplish much, and by calling, if your opponent is trying to bluff you, you keep those bluffs in his range, so I like the flat. Antonius now has a crystal clear fold with his absolutely nothing, and we're going to take a turn.
Quick bet and call of 10K gets us to the turn where Viffer makes 2 pair. Third spade out there gives Ivey the nut flush draw.
Check it.
The turn comes the 7 of spades, which is an interesting card for both players. Ivey's picked up the nut flush draw, however, 10-9's gotten there, 8-7's gotten there, and flushes have gotten there, and David Peat turns 2 pair, but again, flushes and straights beat him. At this point, Ivey takes the prudent line and checks, because if you do bet and get raised, you're going to be in a nightmare of a spot, so I like the decision here to go for the check call. Now David Peat decides to check it back, and I'm a little confused here, and I've seen this kind of play from David Peat in a few other videos as well, but when you have 2 pair in this spot, your opponent can easily have a hand like a jack or an overpair, and by betting, you can get value from those hands. If he has an overpair or top pair with a spade, he's going to have to check call, and if he has a hand like a straight or a flush, while he might trap you, he also might decide to just value bet for himself. So I'd like to see a bet here with the 8-7, because look, yeah, it's a bit of a dicey spot, and if you get check raised, you're in a tough situation. However, it's kind of unlikely you're behind, and also think about the rivers that can kill your hand. If the river is a jack, if the river is a 4, if the river is a 10, if the river is a 9, if the river is a spade, any of these rivers will be terrible for your hand. So you have to bet here, get some value, and allow yourself an opportunity to take a showdown on a bad river. Anyway, it goes check, check, and we're playing the river.
Both players check, and Viffer fills up on the end.
That's 20,000.
Ivey value betting 20,000, but he's crushed.
Raise.
Raise. Raise at 45,000.
How much is it?
45.
Viffer's made it 64,000 total.
44.
The river comes another 7, and remember how I said David Peat has to play in some tough rivers? Well, this isn't one of them. He rivers a full house, and all of a sudden it seems like the stars are aligning. At this point, Phil Ivey has to imagine that his hand's ahead. It's pretty tough for his opponent to ever have a 7. I mean, maybe a hand like 9-7 suited, but that's somewhat unlikely, all things considered. So he really has to put his opponent on either a weaker jack or an 8 or a hand like 9s. It's unlikely his ace-jack is really behind unless his opponent decided to trap the turn. And as an interesting note here, because Ivey has the ace of spades, it's now less likely he's being trapped as well. So Ivey decides to bet about 22,000 here into 37,000, which is maybe a little on the small side. I'd like to see a little bit more like 25, 27,000, I think makes sense. But I like the bet. I actually am a big fan of the way Ivey's played his hand. Now over to David Peat, and he has a very, very disguised full house. In fact, in this situation, he really shouldn't almost ever have full houses because those hands should be betting the turn. So Ivey bets, and now he has to decide how much should he raise to. And in general, I'd like to see a raise here to about 60, 70, 80,000. I'm not exactly sure what his stack is. It's kind of hard to tell from the chips. It looks like he's probably playing something around 80 to 100,000 behind. Can't exactly see. So I'd like to see a raise here for most of his stack. I think that makes the most sense. If he wants to go ahead and go all in, I'm also okay with that. Now, one thing to note here, if you are going to be raising on this river with some hands like 8-7, you want to make sure to mix in a couple other hands as bluffs. A potential candidate could be a hand like 9-8, a hand with an 8 in it that didn't river the backdoor boat. So in these situations where you can have strong hands, remember to mix in a few bluffs too. Anyway, he raises it up to 64,000, and now it's back on Ivey. He's got a tough situation. He has top pair, top kicker, thought he was good pretty much every step of the way, and now his opponent's saying, hey man, I've got you beat, with a hand that probably just trapped him on the turn. It's kind of unlikely, especially because he has ace-jack with the ace of spades that he was behind, and now his opponent is trying to sell this story. Sometimes in these situations, you kind of have to decide what you think about your opponent. Against some tighter players, maybe you could lay it down. Against some looser players, maybe you could call. Really, it's kind of up to you. But the thing is, Phil Ivey has a mystical quality that lets him soul read you, I would know, as we did on a previous Poker Hands episode where I got owned by Phil Ivey. So can he get away here from this full house?
44.
Viffer looks like he danced with a bad piece of fish.
Okay.
Ivey makes the call and gives David Peat an extra 44,000. Credit Viffer for being able to maintain as long as he did with the Ivey laser beam staring right into his soul.
I also want to make a quick correction. In a prior video of Ivey versus Viffer, I said that he check called the river with queen high, but I believe there was an error with the whole card scanner and he actually had flopped top pair. If you want to know what I'm talking about, you can find the link to that video in the description below. I just wanted to correct the action from that hand. Thank you for joining me here today for Poker Hands, and I want to say really quickly that a lot of the videos I've been doing lately have been getting a lot more views than normal, and I want to make clear to those new viewers that this is an analysis channel. We take hands. I'm a high-stakes poker professional myself, and I analyze them to tell you how they should have been played. Anyway, if you are new here and you want to get more videos, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join the team.